A war has been raging in the Philippines since 2016, not between nations, but between the government and its own people. This war was ignited by Rodrigo Duterte, a man who ascended to the presidency on the 30th of June 2016. Duterte, a former lawyer and mayor, campaigned with a promise to cleanse the land of drugs, particularly the cities with the highest crime rates: Quezon City, Manila, Cebu City, Davao City, and Zamboanga City. A promise that resonated with many Filipinos who were fatigued by the rampant drug-related crimes plaguing their cities. He also pledged to fill the morgues with dealers and users, a warning that echoed loudly in these cities. Duterte's strongman image, coupled with his unconventional methods, provided a glimmer of hope for many who sought change. He garnered a reputation for his no-nonsense approach, an approach that often blurred the lines between legality and morality. This controversial figure, unflinching in the face of international scrutiny or human rights concerns, was prepared to wage a war against drugs, a war that would exact a high cost from his people and the nation. So began a war would forever alter the face of the Philippines and these 5 cities. A battlefield in the neighborhoods was the reality for many inhabitants of the Philippines when Duterte started his campaign. His aggressive crackdown on drug dealers and users was relentless. More than 6,000 drug users and dealers were officially killed in a nationwide crackdown. But these weren't high-ranking cartel members or international drug lords. No, most of these victims were impoverished, living in slums in and around Manila, the nation's capital. They were the ones who bore the brunt of Duterte's war. But the human cost of this war was even higher than official records suggest. Human rights groups argued that the death toll was much higher. In 2020, the United Nations alleged that tens of thousands may have been killed in the war on drugs since mid-2016, including at least 73 children. This war wasn't just a battle against drugs, but a battle against the country's most vulnerable citizens, waged with near impunity for the police and with a clear incitement for violence by top officials. The world watched in horror as the war on drugs unfolded. International human rights organizations raised concerns about the excessive use of force, extrajudicial killings, and the violation of due process. Yet it continued. Families were torn apart, communities lived in fear, and the society was left grappling with a profound sense of loss. The war on drugs was not just a political policy but a human tragedy that unfolded on the streets of the Philippines. But as we delve deeper, a question arises. Who were the real targets? Were they really the drug dealers and users? Surely the real enemies were not the street-level dealers or users, but the powerful cartels behind them. The intricate web of the Philippine drug trade is dominated by several major cartels. The Sinaloa cartel, a notorious syndicate from Mexico, has been an influential player, along with local outfits like the Curatong Balaleng and the Ozamis gang. These cartels are not just drug traffickers. They are sophisticated, well-funded organizations with a firm grip on the supply chains, effectively controlling the drug trade in the country. Duterte's campaign, while controversial, aimed at dismantling these organizations. But did it succeed? Some would argue yes, as the hardline approach led to the apprehension of key cartel figures. However, many argue that the approach was misdirected, overly focusing on street-level dealers and users, rather than the key players at the top of these criminal enterprises. Did Duterte's war make a real impact, or was it a war waged on the wrong front? Let's delve deeper as we explore the aftermath. Did this war on drugs lead to a safer Philippines, or did it create a climate of fear and violence? The aim was to reduce crime rates and make the streets safer. But did this hardline approach achieve its goals? Official reports indicate a drop in crime rates during Duterte's presidency. However, human rights groups argue that these figures only reflect the decrease in petty crimes. They claim that serious crimes, particularly extrajudicial killings linked to the drug war, escalated during the same period. As for drug trafficking and selling, it's a mixed bag. On one hand, the campaign resulted in the seizure of enormous amounts of illegal substances and the arrest of numerous drug dealers. On the other hand, it failed to dismantle the powerful drug cartels that controlled the trade. These syndicates adapted, shifting their operations underground or to more remote regions of the country. Many argue that Duterte's war on drugs did more harm than good. It created a climate of fear and hostility, with impoverished communities bearing the brunt of the violence. The war left thousands of children orphaned and families devastated, further perpetuating the cycle of poverty and crime. So, what is the state of the Philippines today after Duterte? Is the Philippines still caught in the throes of this drug war, or has the tide turned? As we step into the present day, the Philippines is under the leadership of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. His approach to the drug problem has been a point of interest and comparison to his predecessor Rodrigo Duterte. Under Marcos Jr.'s administration, the focus seems to have shifted slightly. While maintaining a firm stance against drug trafficking and use, there's a noticeable push towards rehabilitation for the users, rather than outright punishment. This shift in focus is seen as a more humane approach, addressing the root causes of drug addiction rather than just the symptoms. Cities once known as drug hotspots are now witnessing a change. Rehabilitation centers and support groups are becoming more common, providing a lifeline for those caught in the vicious cycle of addiction. This is a stark contrast to the previous administration's hardline approach, which was often criticized for its heavy-handedness and disregard for human rights. However, the effectiveness of Marcos Jr.'s approach is still up for debate. While there's been a decrease in drug-related violence, the presence of drug cartels and trafficking networks remains a significant concern. The new administration is still grappling with these issues, trying to strike a balance between law enforcement and rehabilitation. As the Philippines moves forward, it remains to be seen whether this war on drugs will be remembered as a necessary evil or a dark chapter in the nation's history.